rather to do with overcoming fear, fear of failure, fear of ridicule, fear of death. Death, where is thy sting? It is a triumphant shout of defiance to the powers of oppression, that they can do their worst in the physical sense, but ultimately cannot crush the spirit. Amen.
This is their service album. And Willie Smith is the teacher in charge of Koinonia.
What does Koinonia mean?
It is a New Testament Greek word, and it means communion, it means fellowship. You had Jesus and his disciples, and then you had the way, it was known as the way, then it was known as the Koinonia, and then the church. So our mission, we feel, is contained in the name, that it is about a group of people living and sharing and working and praying and serving and playing together. And out of our life together comes our service, our relationships, we take very seriously love your neighbor. So we work very hard to be in relationship with people. And sometimes that takes a while, and sometimes it can be messy, but the key is relationships. Communion.
And say a little bit more about, you were saying before about how you can get kind of caught up in the cause, but the cause should come out of the relationships.
Right. Yes, at Koinonia we work very intentionally on living the life, and then being centered on that life, a group of people going to God together, so to speak, and staying very, very rooted in that, and then out of that comes what we do. And a lot of times groups or even individuals will make the cause the God. And when oftentimes everything falls apart, and then the cause, you abandon the cause, or you become bitter about causes can tend to make enemies, make the other, and Koinonia tries to be in relationship, even with people that we don't necessarily agree with. Want to be in dialogue, want to sit down together at a meal together and talk. We think if more small groups of people would get together over food and talk, we might find out we have more things in common than we do not. So I'm sure I sound like the eternal optimist, but Koinonia has been around since 1942, and we've had lots of people not like us and bomb us and shoot at us and boycott us, but we're still here, and we're still working to be in relationship, and a lot of times things are really, really good.
The looking at the history and sort of the origins and the part of the mission being about the equality of all people, and Koinonia then being a rationally integrated community in the South during Jim Crow and all of the tension and violence and everything that it experienced around that, the sort of relevance of the community and what it was doing in that day and age was, I mean, at least looking back, very obvious. What would you say the relevance of Koinonia in the world today is?
Well, I would go back to the origin. Clarence Durden, I'll just focus on him. He's the most well known of our founders. He was a young activist within the slums of Louisville, Kentucky, and then he was going to seminary. He was a farmer, but he was going to seminary, and he became a New Testament Greek scholar, and he discovered this word koinonia. And why he founded Koinonia was he wanted to live as the early Christians lived, in community. He didn't have a big cause. I mean, he knew where he was going to go put himself, and he knew he had skills in farming, but he came here to be in relationship with people and to try to live. I mean, he called it an experiment in Christian living, or a demonstration plot for the Kingdom of God, which is a very agricultural demonstration plot, comes from that part of his life. But it was about coming here, and hopefully other people would come and join him and his wife Florence and Martin and Mabel England, and to be in relationship with the neighbors and see what God had in mind. He knew he was going to farm. He wanted to bring his scientific knowledge about farming to this rural area of Georgia and help share what he knew. But he quickly learned that farming out of the books was very different than farming up close and personal. So he learned from the sharecropping farmers around here, black and white, but he was trying to live it. And one of the first things that happened was they found a little money, and so they were able to pay a neighbor to come help them. That neighbor happened to be black. It came lunchtime, and of course, you come and sit, because that's what he felt Jesus was talking about. We want to be rooted in the Sermon on the Mount in particular. And so, of course, it wasn't an act of oh, I'm going to do this, so we get into it's what was expected of him if he was going to be an authentic Christian. So the black man sat down and ate with them, which actually was against the law in the South at that particular time. So it wasn't like he came here and said, okay, I'm going to fight for civil rights. He came here as, I'm going to try to live like a Christian and be an example maybe for other Christians who don't seem to be doing very much. And so it was the life brought Clarence and the community here. And so we are still trying to live that life in the present day context. Our civil rights, is that all settled? Absolutely not. Everybody is welcome at Koinonia, have been since 1942. No matter your race, your gender, your sexual orientation, your socioeconomic, your race, faith or no faith, it doesn't matter. You come and you're welcome. You might have a meal with us. You might take a tour. You might need something that we might have, and so it's about living a life, and being a little cautious of causes. Mm-hmm. We feel there's going to be plenty to do. But if we do that from a place of rootedness and prayer and a prayerful life together, we'll probably do it with a better attitude, and we'll probably do it a little better in terms of loving your neighbor. Like I said, I think a lot of times we make enemies. We may not even be able to call them by name, but we make enemies. But Koinonia is about learning how to be a neighbor over and over and over again. Being in relationship doesn't mean, like one of the things I often talk about is that we're not a social service agency. Our neighbors help us just as much as we help our neighbors. So it isn't about these people that are living in intentional community and we are so wonderful and we're going out and it's a mutual back and forth. It's being friends, being family, if you will.
There's that part in the documentary where some of the local leaders who I had the sense were sympathetic to Clarence Durden and what was happening here, but were also, stuck in tradition and concerned about the community, and they make this argument in the documentary, well, you're trying to be being a good Christian and it's about creating harmony, but it seems like what you're doing is creating discord, and I mean, could you stop it please, was kind of the subtext. Yeah. But there's a way in which it seems like, and the whole documentary is called Briars in the Context, the whole of this being an irritant. Mm-hmm. And so there's a way in which it seems like Clarence knew what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it wasn't like he was sort of naively,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Absolutely.
like,
Yeah.
so can you say a little more about how reconcile that idea of not being about causes, but also clearly putting yourself in a situation where you're going to be an irritant,
Mm-hmm.
but for a purpose that you believe in.
Yeah. Simply put, there is a gospel culture, and there is an American culture. So I'm just speaking from where I am in the U.S. I mean, there are lots of other cultures, but there's the gospel culture, and then there's the culture in which you live. And sometimes people think the American culture is the gospel culture, and they're in conflict. So if you're trying to, it's like what he says to his daughter about if you go out and march, if you go seeking trouble. But if you are living the life and out of your natural living of your life, you get thrown in jail. I'll go all the way to the Supreme Court for you. Koinonia has gone out, and we members of Koinonia or friends of Koinonia that are long-term visitors, volunteers at Koinonia have gone out and protested. I'm not saying that we don't have that part, but if it comes out of a place of remembering who we are or who we're trying to be, I don't know whether you ever or totally are, but we're trying to be, that if it comes out of the life that you're living, Jesus was living a life and trying to do, he went to synagogue, he knew the scriptures, he did what a young Jew did, but when it came between what the culture had done to Judaism and what he was representing, there was conflict. He was crucified. So living the life does not mean you're not going to be a briar, that you're not going to get into trouble, that you're not going to be persecuted. So that's what we're continuing to do. We're trying to live the life. We're trying to, just one might be not the best example, but it popped into my mind. We have evolved, and we know now what is happening to this planet. We feel a responsibility to help with the earth, So we got to a point that we realized pouring poison on food did not make sense. We no longer use any pesticides, herbicides, fungicides anywhere, but I'm going to specifically talk about our pecan trees. On our pecan trees, everybody in this area thinks we have lost our mind. You're never going to get any pecans. That is naive. That's silly. Well, you know what? There's one orchard that's giving us pecans. The rest are old variety that are susceptible to scab, but we remain faithful. We keep trying to use biological amendments to work the soil, to bring the soil back to life, because healthy food, if you have healthy soil, you're going to have healthy food. If you had dead soil, I can't see that the food's going to be healthy. Now, is that going to cause people to shoot at us? No, it hasn't. But scab is airborne. So we've had some people accuse us of spreading scab. So we didn't set out to have a okay, we're going to revolutionize agriculture in Southwest Georgia. That wasn't the cause. What happened is through learning, through observing, through prayer, through meditation, through reading, the earth is in trouble. What can we do? Are we going to save the earth? I don't know, but no, we probably aren't. But we are going to, at Koinonia, respond to that, because we're at a point that we understand that we can't contribute to that anymore. Is there more that we can do? Yes. Pecans require heavy machinery and fossil fuel. So we're constantly evolving and moving forward. Another area is we're working with the immigration issue. We are visiting detainees. We are taking a bag full of clothes, what they're allowed to take with them when they're deported. We get donations. We put this together and give to them as they're being deported. There are a lot of people in Southwest Georgia who are so supportive of that, but there are also people who really do not see immigrants the same way as we do. But we're responding to and trying to do what we feel is right with what we know now and where we are at the present moment in time. So.
I think when I was first here, when I first came, I started to have this question: what would a young Clarence Durden, if he were alive today, what would he be doing? And I think what I've come to learn is that it's kind of my understanding with like the Fund for Humanity was that he recognized, okay, farming isn't really being viable anymore, but we need to, what's the need? Mm-hmm. And the need that he saw was housing. Mm-hmm. And so, and I think I'm hearing what you're saying. Yeah. It's like, you just look for what the need is.
Right. And I disagree that he didn't think farming was viable.
Okay.
Because of the boycott, we couldn't farm from 1957 and 1970. Of his partnership ideas, there was partnership farming, partnership industries and businesses, and partnership housing. Okay. I think of those three, the one he was the most attracted to was partnership farming. Part of it was forming small communities. The whole idea was to get 1 million acres of land in trust and then have small groups of people farm the land, starting micro economies. I mean, he was ahead of the times with they would sell their food, and part of the profit would go back into Fund for Humanity to help get other farmers or other villages. He called them villages. Not everybody in the village would be a farmer. Some would be craftsmen and things like that. So, and he pointed out that back then it would have been $300 million, which was 6 days of what the Vietnam War cost, or 5 days. So he was very passionate about the land. I mean, I think he was way ahead of his time. He didn't know, he didn't know all of the what can happen if you keep putting, fungicides, insecticides, and pesticides. The pesticides, you keep having to make them stronger and stronger and stronger in order for them to kill the pest who adapt. But yeah, I think he was. But I think your point is right. I think he would have see what is the need, and he would respond to that. But he would respond to that, I think, out of the Koinonia.
Koinonia is 77 years old?
77
this
in November.
Year? Right. And it's been through a lot. Where you spoke about this a little bit before when we were talking. What would you say some of the biggest challenges Koinonia is facing right now is?
The biggest challenge is the need for people to join the community. People who want to come and be brothers and sisters and join, and because we have a very big footprint here. Small in the scheme of the great world, but we do a lot of things at Koinonia, and we need committed members. It's a process to become a member. It takes time to become a member, but it's about coming to pray, work, study, serve, and fellowship, and really and truly become a family, become brothers and sisters. And to, the land needs, you need to grow deep roots. And the land requires commitment, so we need people for the long haul. We need committed people, and we live in a time where commitment is not high on the priority list. It's like if things don't work out, we can just move on. We don't stay there and work it out. We can just pick up and go. So that is the biggest need that Koinonia has. Probably has always had that need, and a few times in its history have had committed people here, but then something would happen. The violence, the boycott, Clarence dying, the change of the direction, giving up the communal for a while. Well, now we have the communal back. We need communal members. We need communal members.
And this is, it's in the course of a 77-year-old your community. This is maybe an impossible question to answer, but where do you see Koinonia going?
Mm-hmm. I see us remaining faithful. I think Clarence may say this at the end of Briars in the Cotton Patch. It's from an interview he did. He's asked, well, would you consider your Koinonia successful? And he says, in the terms that those are used, that how success is defined in our culture. From a statistical point of view, we're not. But as long as there's one person, 20 people, 100 people being faithful to this, trying to live this life, then we are. So my hope is that, I would like for there to be many more people than we have now, but I see Koinonia continuing on, being faithful, continuing to welcome, continuing to do what it can out of its life based on the number of people and the resources it has. It's a very unselfish place, and so I do see it. I'm really optimistic about Koinonia continuing on, because I think I said this to you earlier, that if you look at Koinonia with the human mind and all it's been through, it should not exist. So it's almost like, there's in our language we would say, God loves this place and God has been faithful to Koinonia. Not all the people, but God, there's some reason why Koinonia still exists, and so I see us carrying on, doing the best we can at any given time.
There's a so I don't identify as a Christian,
Mm-hmm.
and putting aside whatever I would identify as, there's a way in which, there's a lot of trauma in our society around Christianity,
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly carry some of that, and it's so nice to be in the company of a group of Christians that I feel welcomed by, that I feel like I can relate to,
Mm-hmm.
that I feel like oh yeah, we're whatever our beliefs are, there is some faith that I feel in common, even if it's not on that same kind of
Mhm.
religious sort of belief sort of
Right.
thing. And so I'm not sure what I'm asking here. But I just wondered if you could speak to that. Like, how
Sure.
could somebody who sometimes says I actually identify as an atheist, but I do Buddhist meditation and I have sort of trauma around my mother becoming a born again Christian, and yet here I am, and it feels so good to be in the company of people here at Koinonia. So how does that happen?
Well, before I came to Koinonia, I was a practicing Christian, but I never used the word Christian. I would not, because the name has been, it has been worn as a label on people that I think are not, see, I'm judging. I don't want to judge, but I didn't want to have the label, because if I say I'm Christian, automatically people have this image now, and it's even worse since I've come to Koinonia, because what we see in social media and in our movies, it is the worst part, the worst example. It's actually an example of what Christians are not. I don't think I don't think it's what we're supposed to be, but that's what we're identified with. But one of the things when we were going through reestablishing our commitment to the original vision was we finally came to a point. We're going to reclaim the word. We're going to reclaim the label, and try to live what we think that really is supposed to mean, and continue on the tradition at Koinonia of welcoming everyone. This is our prayer bell, so I'm going to stop for prayer for just a moment.
Sure, no problem.
Amen. So bell rings at 10 and 3 and 8, and whatever we're doing, we just pause. We recenter. For the praying sort, we might pray. We can meditate for a few moments. I find it a very humbling time, because sometimes I get carried away thinking that I'm supposed to take care of everything and do everything, and then that bell reminds me, don't take yourself so seriously, just relax, chill out. So in terms of we wanted to reclaim the word Christian, and try to live it. I mean, if you look at Koinonia's history, that's I have to say, when my life was in the arts, in the theater, but my other interest was church history, and especially spirituality, mysticism, prayer, those kinds of things. And so I took some time away from the theater to go to graduate school in church history in Canada. And once I got there, my grandmother who raised me was diagnosed with terminal cancer, so I knew I probably wouldn't finish the program. So I got together with my several of my professors, and we came up with a independent study. And what I did was I took periods of the church's history when horrendous things were happening, which you and I both know. Pick any time, and horrendous things are happening. But I also studied the social progressive movements of the time, the saints of the time, if you will, all of the good stuff that was going on. That forever changed my life. There is incredible light going on all the time throughout history, despite the horrible things happening. We talk more about those horrible things. We know more about those horrible things. I see those horrible things just sailing through the internet all the time, but there's always this incredible good that's going on, usually very quiet, usually very humble, and so, it's like I'm sorry for the dark. I'm so grateful for the light, and so that kind of has been my my guide since then. And so knowing that there is this light, I would sort of like to be in it as much as I can be. And Koinonia, I think, has always tried to be that. Now, do we do horrible things? Do we have darkness, or do we have terrible days? Do we fall into we're human beings, so we are flawed. But Koinonia tries to live the light, even when it falls down. That when we as individuals have just been so bad, we help each other, we help ourselves, we get back up, and we try to live that life that is contributing something positive to the planet. So.
Anything else that you'd like to share about Koinonia, your experience here, what this all means for the world, or whatever?
Well, of course, I'd like anybody who gets to see this to come and visit. They're welcome. I mentioned that my background is in the arts. Ultimately, I was a playwright. And I have to be honest, if I was writing this play, this is not where I would be. I would be someplace else. But somehow circumstances led me here. And a lot of days, maybe even once a day, in my mind, I think, this is the stupidest thing you've ever done. But there's a peace within my heart, my soul, whatever we want to call it, that this is exactly, even though it's not the script I would have written, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. So I'm at peace with that. And there is something very peaceful about Koinonia. So I hope, I'm sure people come here that haven't experienced that peace, but a lot of people do. So everybody, come see us.